It was a great day to be a part of the Colts passing game, but a bad day for those who care about preseason wins and losses. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Colts fans, thanks so much for tuning in and making us your number one listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Elias. Their app lets you access team and player stats, as well as head-to-head team comparisons. Give yourself the edge this NFL season. Find Elias Game Plan in the App Store or Play Store today. I am Jake Arthur, and I'm coming to you from this weird room in the Lucas Oil Stadium press box, so just please excuse the acoustics and the odd backdrop. I'm joined by our sleeveless wonder, Zach Hicks, once again. Today's show, we're going to give you our instant reactions to the Colts' 27-26 preseason loss to the Detroit Lions. As you know from us by now, it's going to be way more about the players themselves and less about the outcome. So the vast majority of the starters did not play on Saturday. We did see some exceptions. Offensively, left tackle Matt Pryor and Danny Pinter did play, but Danny Pinter was actually at center for Ryan Kelly rather than right guard. Receivers Alec Pierce and Paris Campbell both played, as did tight end Kylan Granson. But Zach, we've discussed throughout the week, those are like important players and starters, but they're also younger guys that need those developmental snaps. So really no surprise there.
No, not at all. I mean, Danny Pinter, I know they view him as a starting right guard, but also a valuable backup on the interior as well. Like he is the backup center as well. So technically that was his role out there today. Matt Pryor, they just want to get more looks at left tackle. And then, with Alec Pierce, Kylan Granson, those guys, they're going to be huge parts of the offense this year. But those are, they're guys who just need more snaps and more looks. So nothing really too surprising with those guys that were out there. It's kind of what we talked about in our pregame show that we expect those guys to go.
Yeah, and on Thursday, Frank Reich told us what to expect from the quarterback play, and it followed that like exact script pretty much. Nick Foles started and played a quarter, which really only amounted to one drive.
Right.
Each team traded really long drives to start the game. Sam Ehlinger took over in the second quarter and played through the majority of the third quarter, and then Jack Cohn polished it all off. Ellinger was a star again today. He was really, really good last week in Buffalo, and then he did it again. He was 9 of 11 today, which is 81.8% of his throws, had 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, and nearly a perfect passer rating of 157.8. What do we see here with Sam Ehlinger?
I mean, kind of expected, kind of everything that you expect out of a fringe quarterback 2, quarterback 3 guy who's mobile and accurate. Like again, we said this a lot since Sam Ehlinger became a Colts quarterback, is he's just kind of built for this. He's a really smart, heady guy with good accuracy, knows how to move a little bit. He was always going to be a perfect preseason quarterback. And I'm not trying to say this as a way to like doubt him or say that he sucks, because obviously he's had some really good games here in the preseason, and the Colts liked him enough to keep him all of last year. It's just I wouldn't take too much of this performance and say it's going to translate to like a regular season environment or anything like that. It's just a different animal, but just a great day for him. And honestly, he is, like we've been saying, the perfect preseason quarterback, because you always get to see what your receivers have when you have a guy like him, because he keeps every play alive. He's going to give guys chances. He can get the ball on time down the field. So, I mean, if the Colts end up not keeping him, I do think he can be a valuable quarterback too for another team. So that's going to be one of the toughest roster decisions is he going to sneak on as a quarterback 3, or will he move on to another team that is really needy for a quarterback 2?
Yeah, and I'll tease you guys with a little interview I did today here in the press box. We'll wind up getting into Sam Ehlinger a little more in the next couple days based on this interview I did. But yeah, Ehlinger, the perfect quarterback to shred a third-team defense.
Right.
But if you had to throw him out there against starters on a Sunday, how would it go? Probably not as well. So he had a couple really bright stars receiving. Desmond Patman led all players with 103 yards on 5 catches and a touchdown. And then Mike Strawn, who just came back this week from that knee injury, he was on PUP all of camp up until this week. He had 3 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. Now, Zach, Patman, of course, really gets the love for the 100-yard game and everything. But you and I were kind of talking before this. Mike Strawn's game looked really good.
Yeah, I think Strawn just looks a little more ahead than Patman. And honestly, I'm not even trying to say bad things about Patman here. I mean, Patman, that shallow cross where he took it for, like a 20-yard gain to start the game was a great play. The way he high pointed on the pump and go on his second catch of the game, again, was a really nice catch. And then, obviously it was a broken coverage, but you still got to make the catch and finish the play like he did. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to say anything bad about Des Patman here, but Strawn just looked smoother. It looked more, I don't know, everything just looked a little easier for Mike Strawn. Like to me, it looked like he had no business being out there with those guys. Like, and that's crazy for a guy who, this is he had 3 practices all summer so far. And then he went out there and played in this first game. So to me, I don't know. I would probably value Strawn a little bit more as a receiver, but I do think both players kind of, especially with the injury to Drew Ogletree, they both kind of solidified their spots on the initial 53-man roster. Like Patman, especially with a lot of the work that he's been getting as a gunner this offseason, I do think both of them have kind of solidified their spots as much as they can at this point. Because, there's always the possibility they could add another receiver, through free agent signing or through a trade or a waiver claim. But as of right now, I do think both those guys are pretty close to locks now after this performance.
Yeah, the unfortunate injury to Drew Ogletree and there being 4 tight ends there, it just kind of opens the door for this wide receiver depth chart to look just like it did last year with Patman and Strawn at 5 and 6. Because Strawn has come in and not looked like an injured player. He looks like he's picking up where he left off last year, which almost means you have to roster him. Like there's no reason not to. But I totally agree. It looked like he was playing JV ball out there. It just really did. And he's another one of those guys that's kind of prone to concentration drops in practice. And so I wasn't impressed by this, but something that was kind of a check mark for me was he just had that little simple comeback with his shorter catch, and he made it. And, it was something where he had to make a quick football move and try and get upfield a little bit. It wasn't a concentration drop. And we've seen that numerous times this summer in camp and the preseason. So something that is routine, he's a younger player that's not making it more difficult than it needs to be. And something like that makes you look like an actual NFL player to me, just doing the small things correctly.
Yeah, he looks good. Honestly, obviously there's still concerns with the wide receiver depth chart, especially with the top 4 guys, but I feel a little better about the bottom of the roster now after seeing this game, even though, again, it was just against second and third string guys, but that you wanted to see that from these guys, and they both stepped up and played really well.
Yeah, and you kind of uncovered a couple gems in last week's game with Will Fries and Wesley French. Your initial reaction before you've rewatched so far, what did you think of the offensive line?
Honestly, I saw a lot of people saying like, oh gosh, the backup offensive line's a big issue. It's scary and stuff like that, where we got to keep in mind, this next game against the Bucks will be the last time ever that Bernhard Raimann, Wesley French, Josh Seltzner, Will Fries, and Jordan Murray all line up next to each other. They will never line up next to each other ever again. And so much about offensive line play is that cohesivity and how these guys play together and stuff like that. So I'm not too concerned if they're looking like they're struggling. I mean, again, a lot of these guys are rookies too. Seltzner, French, or rookies. Fries didn't really play much his rookie year, so it's a lot of growing that these guys need to do, and they can't really do it together. Now, when you have to look at these guys individually, I look at Bernhard Raimann, how much he's grown in these 2 games. I look at Will Fries, who looks like a really dominant pass blocker on the interior. And then I look at a guy like Dennis Kelly, who's going to be back hopefully sometime early this season. And I think that's really solid 3 offensive linemen that you're going to have as your depth players. So I'm really not too concerned about the depth on the O-line. I feel much better about it this year than I did last year, sans Chris Reed, where Chris Reed, I was really high on him, obviously.
You were smitten.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and just parlay that topic into your player of the game then.
Yeah, no, I think Bernhard Raimann would be my player of the game. And I know obviously you're gonna go into the guys here, but the other three we mentioned, great games. Ehlinger, Strawn, Patman were awesome. But Bernhard Raimann bouncing back from kind of a shaky starting game, last week against the Bills, where it had a lot of good and bad moments, to where this game, outside of maybe like a couple stunts that caught him off guard, like he looked awesome. He was not getting challenged whatsoever, and that's even more important because the other side of the line was getting challenged a lot. Jordan Murray and Ryan Vandemark were getting kind of beat like a drum over there. So Bernhard Raimann came out, he played well, and he looked like, this third round pick that we have high expectations for. He looked just like that in this game.
Yeah, and that's really good to hear because, again, there's been some ups and downs in camp and everything. So to see a guy who could potentially be your future at left tackle making those gains, that's definitely good to see. I'm going to go with the layup here, Sam Ellinger. The two receivers had a great day, but the guy getting them the ball, this offensive line, of course, has been shaky, and so they have to have a guy capable of getting them that ball. And, I'm glad Ellinger saw the busted coverage on the Patman play, but he just had some good throws overall, put it exactly where it needed to be for these athletic receivers to have a chance to make the play. So I'll go ahead and give the edge to Sam Ellinger. So, Zach, some of these offensive players might have made themselves some money tonight if it got them onto the roster, but it is not always that easy. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Car stuff, pet stuff, medical bills, what have you. Adulting ain't always easy financially. Things come up. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit card check needed, or no credit check needed. I don't know, they might check your credit card, couldn't tell you. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you. Thanks again for making Locked On Colts your first listen every day. However you play, get the latest NFL draft tips from Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty. Plus, starting August 22nd, next week, we're bringing you daily top 10 lists for Fantasy Draft Week. Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So, Zach, defensive side of the ball, where your bread is buttered. On defense, not many starters in there. Nick Cross and EJ Speed. And EJ Speed, starter by proxy with Shaquille Leonard being out. But still, Nick Cross, another one of those. He's a rookie. He's a young guy that needs the snap. So, again, no surprise seeing him start out there. What did you think from those guys in the brief time they were out there?
Yeah, those two guys are just on a different level than the rest of the guys that are out there. Yeah, Nick Cross, he just moves so different. He looks so smooth in coverage, and we've seen it now with back-to-back games. Don't test him in the red zone, apparently, which is awesome because the Colts needed that last year. The red zone defense, at least to start last season, was really putrid. So having a guy like Cross where you feel comfortable on tight ends or wherever down there, that's awesome. EJ Speed, again, just moves at just a different level, like a different speed than most linebackers, to throw the pun in there. He's just a different level of athlete. And it's great to see how much he's grown as a player over these last couple of years. And you could just see it when he's out there. Like he like, just like how I said was strong on offense, he looked like he had no right being out there at all. The Colts have 4 good linebackers that they can rely on. And we'll talk about some of the guys at the bottom too that I think they can rely on too. But they have their top 4 linebackers. You could wager them against any other team's top 4. And I think the Colts would come, if not on top, in that top 3 or 4 for sure.
Yeah, a lot of teams don't even have 3 that they're comfortable with starting. The Colts have 4. So that's definitely great. I'm excited to not at the expense of Shaquille Leonard being out, but I'm excited to see EJ Speed in the regular season whenever that comes up. One guy that I thought looked really good today, and it's a great story, is Tyquan Lewis.
Yep.
And it just seems so bizarre because he had that patellar injury last Halloween. It's a serious injury to come back from. It's worse than an ACL typically. But he doesn't look like he's lost a step. He's still explosive and quick and still real strong, and he gets into the backfield routinely. And I thought today was another good example of that.
Yeah, I think he's quietly taken over that fourth rusher on passing downs.
Yeah. I think that's without question at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. And don't get me wrong, Dio Dambo had a strong game as well. He's a guy who's had a lot of good moments this offseason. But it just doesn't look as clean with him. Dio, it looks like a hurricane, literally, like, the hurricane.
Yeah.
It just looks like a frenzy when he's coming. And sometimes when he hits, it's just this insane blend of power and speed, and it's great. But with Tyquan Lewis, it looks so precise, it looks so developed, and it looks like something that you want to see on Sundays next to DeForest Buckner. So I think both of them are going to play a lot this season, but Tyquan Lewis is probably got the early edge, and I think it's pretty safe to say that's going to be his role to start the season.
Yeah, most definitely. Again, Dio, we'll roll this into talking about Dio and another defensive lineman. He had 2 sacks today. He's just kind of Johnny on the spot. He gets there with his skill and athleticism into the backfield, and it's really his second effort and his ability to continue with the play that gets him those effort sacks. The play breaks down, the quarterback rolls out of the pocket or moves up, he's there to get him. And if he's not going to be a real polished pass rusher yet, then at least he has that effort and motor to keep him playing, because that is the difference between a lot of big plays in the NFL, is just the effort and sticking with it to the end. It's something you see from Kwity Paye. It's how Kwity Paye ends up near the ball seemingly every time, is that effort and playing through the whistle. But him and another guy that had a sack today, and he's really heating up lately, is Ifeadi Odenigbo. We've seen it in practice. We've seen it in these games. He is routinely getting to the quarterback. If he's not getting the sack, he's making the pocket uncomfortable and making the quarterback move. So, he's someone you and I quietly talked about a bit ever since the Colts signed him. But now I think more people are starting to pay attention. And, I heard plenty of chatter today of people saying, how does he not make the roster at this point?
Yeah. I think I think he should be a lock at this point now. We said it in our other podcast that he's like 85% sure. We felt pretty good about it. But now, I think he should make the roster. Him and Ben Banogu as those kind of next men up after like Tyquan and Dio. I think it makes a lot of sense to have those two like speed rushers that can bring a little bit of power. So, I think Ifeadi Odenigbo is pretty safe right now for me.
And then we'll go ahead and talk to a position that you absolutely love, the linebackers. What do you think of these young guys out here? We got Forrest on the field finally.
Dude, top to bottom, this linebacker group just looks really strong. Again, those top 4 guys are awesome. They're great. They're going to make the team, and they're going to be big time performers this year. But Sterling Weatherford, I thought, was awesome today. Like just had a really strong game. He reminds me a lot of EJ Speed a couple years ago, where maybe not everything is there for him yet, but you can see the athletic ability. You could see the raw potential that he has. And if he ever gets to be as good as EJ Speed is now, that'd be awesome. But he just looks like a player that you want to develop and you want to have out there for at least for special teams or as a, reserve player. So for me, if I were making the roster decisions, I would probably say he's a lock, but I don't know how the Colts are kind of feeling about that. But today was just a great game for him. And then Forrest Ryan and James Skalsky, I think they both look like prime practice squad guys. I think they have played really well, and Forrest Ryan was all over the place in run defense today when the Colts had some positive run defensive snaps. So Forrest Ryan, I think, is playing himself onto that practice squad for sure.
And without further ado, who defensively earns your player of the game?
So I do want to do an honorable mention with Sterling Weatherford because he'd be my second guy for it. But Tyquan Lewis for sure. Tyquan Lewis, seeing him come back from that injury and play really well. And then he got to come out of the game kind of early, which I was happy about because it was like, okay, we've seen enough. He's doing the things we expect against these backups, and they pulled him. But just for him to get out there and get some run and look productive, that was a great thing to see.
Yeah, and I'll take another layup. Dio, yes, he had 2 sacks. That looks like it jumps off the box score, of course. But again, I just feel like he's a player I'm kind of seeing some growth from. It is chaos when he's coming off the line. But it's effective. It's not like I don't know. It's not like it's totally reckless. Like it's
Right.
at least not in vain. He's getting pass blockers. In the run game, I'm noticing him, shed blockers more and collapse down on the runner. I just see him growing a little bit more. And I know a lot of people through camp so far didn't think they had heard enough from him or, seen enough from him. And I think he's starting to show that. Maybe he's a guy that's just a gamer, like who was it? Nick Cross we talked about.
Isaiah Rodgers.
Isaiah Rodgers too. Coaches were wanting to see maybe a little more consistency, but once the lights come on, these guys are ready to play. And Dio seems like that. I don't think he'd be an 8-sack guy right now by any means, but I think he can be productive.
Yep. Now coming up, guys, we're going to talk about some risers and fallers from this preseason game. But before we do that, we do got to get a little serious for a second and talk about one of our sponsors on this podcast, BetterHelp. When I was coming out of college, or when I left college, not coming out of college, but I mean, I was leaving college. But when I left college as an 18-year-old, it was just a struggle for me, as a young man who's always told you have to go to college to be successful and stuff, it was tough walking away from that. And so I was able to turn to therapy and it really helped me. Life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through it all. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. I haven't personally used BetterHelp yet. I know that because we get a little bit of a discount with this and through our ads with Locked On, I will definitely look into it. But just in my experience with therapy in general, it's just been great. It's always helped me when I've gotten to such a low point, just to bring me up to a steady place where I can be my best self. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to. And getting therapy every week is as easy as a few clicks on your laptop or phone. With therapy, it can take a few tries to get the right fit for you. BetterHelp makes it easy and free to change therapists if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline therapy, and financial aid is available. And they have a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, Jake, let's kick off this third section of the podcast here and talk about the guy who everyone says helped himself the most. And I don't know if I fully buy it, but I do think it's going to be a tough decision for the Colts decision makers, is Sam Ellinger. What do you do with him after this? Because
Right.
Undeniably, he has been a riser this preseason. But is it enough to warrant the Colts keeping a third quarterback?
So I don't know how I feel about keeping 3 quarterbacks just
Right.
for the sake of you don't want to lose these guys. I think it obviously makes you sacrifice somewhere else. However, I understand that they're not going to want to just lose him and waive him and hope he gets on the practice squad. Another team signs him, and then you've lost a quarterback you really like and have developed for nothing. Right. So best case scenario is, if you're not going to, I guess you go on with 3 quarterbacks, or another quarterback needy team loves what they've seen from him, thinks he fits into their system really well, and is willing to pony up like a day 3 draft pick or something. At least if you're going to part with him, you only carry 2 quarterbacks, 2 proven veterans, and you get a draft pick out of it. So that's a tough one.
Yeah, and for everyone saying, oh, he should be quarterback 2, look, Nick Foles is going to be QB2 this year.
Yeah.
He is, unless he tears something in this next game. Nick Foles is QB2 this year. So you guys can stop talking about that or saying, even if you think he should be, it's not going to happen. So, but talk about some other risers. Obviously, we talked about them beginning of the show. Mike Strawn and Desmond Patman. I mean, again, they kind of solidified their spots at 5 and 6, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's 3 more practices here in training camp, 1 more preseason game. So there's not a ton more to show, but I mean, I think they were just looking for more from Patman. He at least checked the boxes on his strengths that they already know he has. And that run after the catch is something I think they knew he could do and has added to it. And then Strawn, I don't know what else there is to see from him. I mean, make sure he stays consistent on special teams and things like that. But I think it's wide receiver 5 and 6 with those 2 now. I would personally carry him on the roster if it was my choice.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Let's go into the defensive line now. Let's talk some defensive line, defensive ends, and defensive tackles, because I think some people were saying, and I know it's not on your list here, so I do want to just throw it at you, but some people were saying Ben Bandigu hurt his chances today. What do you think?
Yeah, he's just he's staying kind of steady, and like, I don't know. I just still feel like he is really reliant on his athleticism and stuff. And I feel like at this point you should see more from more moves and counter moves and things from him. I just feel like if he doesn't get that dip around the outside, then he's toast. He's another guy that has uses a lot of effort and has high energy. But I mean, I don't know. I think he's still worth keeping on the roster. But I do think other guys have caught up to him, where other guys are rising. He's just kind of staying flat on the line right now.
Yeah. But talking about this defensive tackle group now, I think it's the same as last week for me. Curtis Brooks and Eric Johnson, I think, are clearly above the other guys that are competing on the interior. But I don't think it's like I feel super confident with them. Yeah. I think it honestly, for me, it might be a situation where you keep both of them as well, and then you might look into bringing in a fifth defensive tackle, because I don't know, man. Eric Johnson, I think, is decent enough in the run game where I'd feel okay with him to start the season as like the backup 1 tech, and then if you have Dio and Taekwon as the backup 3 tech, I feel okay with that. But I don't know, man. These backup defensive tackles were getting rolled off the ball. And Eric Johnson and Curtis Brooks, they looked better later in the game. But early on, I mean, for anyone who was out there, it looked really bad.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both like those players long-term developmentally, but like the Colts need someone established right now. And unfortunately, Chris Williams being out really kind of throws a wrench into that. I definitely think defensive tackle is one of the biggest groups they could look to add to when the waiver wire hits.
Yeah, no, I agree. That, and then corner as well. Even though I think some of the corners played pretty well, we actually didn't talk about him, our defensive one. I think we just missed him. But Tony Brown, you think he helped or hurt his stock today?
I don't know. I was going to ask you kind of the same thing. I mean, I think he gave up the touchdown in the corner of the end zone, had the heads-up play with the interception. I mean, he was just kind of there in the right place, right time for the most part. Special teams, he's a good player. I thought he had at least one other good coverage play. I think he had a pass breakup also.
Yep.
I mean, compared to the rest of the guys on the roster, I think he does make it right now, especially since he can play inside and out. But I don't know if you were going to get to him, but I liked Anthony Chesley today too.
Yeah, no, Chesley looked great too. And Chesley, again, is a good special teamer. So I think that really helps his chances at all times. But for me, just looking at this corner group, I think Tony Brown is clearly head and shoulders the 5th best corner in this cornerback group. Like, I don't think it's even close, like remotely, especially when you factor in that he can play inside and outside, and he's a really good special teamer and gunner. So I think he's, if they're only keeping guys that are currently of the pecking order, like on this team, like he's a lock. But it could be a waiver wire situation like last year where the Colts claim a couple DBs. But I like Tony Brown. I think he had some mostly good moments today outside of that touchdown allowed. So I don't know. I think that's going to be a really interesting call there. For me, I'm just going to list off a couple other guys who I think really rose in this game. And then you can jump in if you want as well. But Sterling Weatherford, obviously, I think really helped his stock. Will Fries, I think 100% lock now. Like, I feel pretty comfortable with that. He didn't even play like in the 4th quarter either, so the Colts are pretty comfortable with him.
Yeah.
There was another player I wanted to say in there too. I think Cam Klein keeps looking pretty good too, even though he had the concussion at the end of the game.
Unfortunate. Yeah.
Cam Klein is another guy who kind of flashed a little bit. I don't know if he has any practice squad availability left, but I think he flashed a little bit as well. And then there was another guy too that I want to throw in there. Can't think right now. Jack Cohen for the last touchdown.
Your new profile picture.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. But honestly, it was a nice throw and nice catch there at the end of the game to nearly tie it up. So I will give credit where credit is due. Jack Cohen defied all odds and led the Colts down to a potential game-tying touchdown.
Yeah, and I'll give you one last quick cherry on top. Your guy, Trevor Denbo.
That's who it was. That's who it was. Yeah, it was on the tip of my tongue. Dude, Denbo, man, like, I don't know how good he is actually on defense or if he can ever play in the NFL on defense, but he is a menace on special teams.
He really is, man. Like, It's almost like he was built in a special teams lab. I don't know. He's always like the first guy down there. He did have one good hit defensively today, but special teams is definitely where I noticed him the most.
Yeah, no, I think if you're keeping someone purely for special teams, I would consider him over Armani Watts. I'd consider it. I don't know what the Colts are thinking, though, but I love him on special teams. He is a really good special teams player.
I agree. I mean, I can't say one way or the other to put him on the roster, but I would not be shocked if he makes it based on special teams ability alone. We've seen guys before make the roster who they had no intention of playing offensively or defensively. So, I think that's all for us today, folks. We'll be back with you on Monday for more on this game after we've divvied up our rewatches and look ahead to the final week of Colts training camp. Again, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's it. And then the last preseason game is back here at Lucas Oil Stadium on Saturday against the Buccaneers.
Yeah, make sure you guys are following us there on social media at JArthurNFL for all your camp updates, at Zach Hicks 2 for a bunch of meaningless preseason all-22 film that's going to be through these next couple days. Listen to or see, read our work on horseshoehuddle.com. You guys can tell I'm tired and hungry right now. Horseshoehuddle.com. You could read all of our work. Jake again with all the training camp stuff, me with all the film nerd stuff. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Locked On Colts. We're getting close to that 1,000 subscriber goal. I think we're almost at 850 now, so that's great. You guys keep that up. And then wherever you listen to the podcast, rate, review, subscribe, leave a comment. We love and appreciate all of you guys, and just keep it up.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thanks again for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now make Locked On Fantasy Football your second listen. Find the intellectual fantasy expert Vinny Iyer, who brings over 20 years of NFL expertise and a unique angle to give you the moves that no one else has. Get ready for your fantasy draft with Locked On Fantasy Football today. We'll see you guys Monday.